Well. How are we? How are we? How are we on this fine day, on this wonderful day that the Lord has made? This is Dr. Gregory Clarke Sr. And it's interesting. We are in day 28 of this federal government shutdown. We're starting to see the aspects and the areas of how this is going to impact at least 42 million people across the country. And, that's probably why I was in the mode. Usually before we go live and start recording, we usually have like a musical interlude. And today was more or less about just recognizing how we need friends in this moment. We need the ability to recognize who has saved us. And we're not looking for any, entity to save us. We're not looking for something outside of ourselves to save us. But when we start to recognize that we have been well positioned, we have dealt with this type of strife, or how should I say, when they talk about black and brown communities, we know how to roll with the punches when things may not be rolling correctly. And as it looks like is going to end up being the longest government shutdown in the history of this country, we're seeing the type of game that they're playing. And we just have to be very prayerful, very mindful how um, how karmatic this can be, because you only can reap what you sow. You only can reap what you sow. But before we go any further, let me at least acknowledge the people here, because I know others are in other meetings, so that's probably why it looks a little sparse today. But everything happens for a reason. We still gonna keep on this pathway, even if there's only one other person in the room. And that's how you know that you're called to do something and you're not being based on numbers. So without further ado, Mr. Everett Guthrie, how is everything down there in Florida? And I know with what is impacting the nation of most of our lineage who is on this call right now, as I can see, have you been able to have any correspondence with anyone on the island?
Good evening. I mean, leading up to it, everything looked very calm. Since
Mhm.
the landing, I haven't been able to get any information, but I guess no news is good news. I look at it so
Mhm.
far. And the few people I talked to, I have people there. Every report was that all was well so far.
Mhm.
So based on the size of the storm and all of that is a lot, is a lot. But we are very resilient in spite of, and I'm still
Mhm.
waiting to hear word because it right now might be still in the heights of it. So we're still waiting to hear word. But so far, I look at it that no news is good news.
Excellent, 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 excellent. And without further ado, we're going to go to Mr. Boston himself, Mr. Massachusetts, none other than Mr. Trevor Singleton. How is everything up in your parts?
Uh, everything everything is pretty decent. I am definitely um, wanted to come in as much as I can as soon as I can because as you know in between meetings. So thank you for greeting me. I do have to scoot at 8 o'clock, but I wanted to at least say hello and thank you for creating the space.
Not a
I'm
problem, not a
complete.
problem. Well, appreciate that, appreciate that, appreciate that. We recognize, people have lives. We're not going to be mad at that. There's nothing wrong with that. That just shows that you're moving in some level of possibility, and possibility is always a good thing. So let me go to our co-host for the evening, Miss Nicole Johnson, see how's everything down there in the boogie down, and also have you been able to contact any family and friends down there in the Caribbean?
Good evening. I would say about 85% of the family I'm close to is in America, thankfully,
Hmm.
but there's still a concern. But I'm actively watching videos, and there is allegedly a report that the hurricane will be off of the island in about an hour. So
Okay.
that is a great thing.
Excellent. 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 That is true. That is so true. So we won't belabor long, because if we keep staying on this same task about the 42 million people who are about to lose their SNAP benefits, talking about the constant argument of regardless of what side of the fence you are about the Affordable Care Act, which they love to throw out there as Obamacare. If you had something better, or if you have something that can make the system better, then present that to the American people so there can be a checks and balance or a possibility of a conversation. But what makes this conversation so detrimental is that it's almost as if someone is willing to burn down the house with themselves in it. And when it comes to knowing that at least close to 44% of people who receive SNAP benefits, which is the majority, happen to be of Caucasian descent. And so we have to be mindful when we see some of how's the best way to express it? See some of sometimes the optics that they will attempt to utilize and, look for that Hispanic American or that Black African American to be asked some questions about the program, not recognizing that the majority of the people who are able to circulate those dollars in the Walmarts of the world or the different other areas where they circulate their dollars to have some level of food on their table or other communities. So it becomes very mindful and very almost systemic at times of how they attempt to shape the narrative. But then when you start to hit them with facts, then it becomes fake news. So we're going to continue to keep those individuals in prayer. We're going to continue to allow those individuals accordingly just to recognize, how they can be in the respective space as, we keep those people in prayer. So, we know of individuals, regardless of family, friends, associates around you that might be impacted. This is a great season to find out more about the food pantries or, anything that's going to help because we don't want people, having to go drastic. And when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we don't want people to get drastic, which it could ultimately go to. Not that we're condoning it or promoting it, but we desire for it not to get to a point that it becomes so drastic that people start to take certain other alternatives to make sure that they get food on their table. Because America shouldn't be like that. We're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, then why are we even acting like this? Why are we even creating an atmosphere where this could be even a possibility? So I'm going to get off that road as we're going to talk about today and get into the teaching because I desire not to labor long as well. Let us get into the teaching and make sure that we are all good. We are all good. And as always, I always ask, um, Miss Johnson, if she can see my screen, then I know we're good.
Yes, I can.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we're going to expound a little bit more on cultural ontology and the ongoing breakthroughs because, as I stated earlier in my beginning space of talking, when you start to understand that Black and brown people have always, not necessarily that we're always stuck behind the scratch line or under the scratch line, but we know how to make things work. We've seen, people who may not have had as much resources or access to things make miracles happen. And so we honor all those Black and brown women who, have been able to, take a couple of pieces of this and that and this, that, and the third, and all of a sudden you have a meal on the table. And you're like, well, where the hell did this come from? Or how was they able to do this? And that goes back to the ingenuity and the possibilities of our community, which we all are blessed to be a part of. So as we deal forward, we talk about the philosophy of always becoming. Remember, we are not static beings. We are always unfolding in wisdom. And when we recognize that, then, even this too shall pass. But as I stated earlier, you always shall reap what you sow. And hopefully this administration recognizes what they're reaping generally or globally, because at this time, the president of the United States is somewhere in Asia, doing that dumb dance of his and all kind of other stuff, meeting with other, areas where, you know, he said this, and I mind you, it goes back to a quote that he said in 2013 when President Obama was in office and the United States was going through, which was like a short break, which was a shutdown, but it wasn't as long as this. And that was when leadership was still at hand and willing to negotiate and willing to come to the table and have conversations, not jet off across the globe while stuff is happening, or the Speaker of the House still shutting down the House of Representatives. So okay, they're not even meeting. So it's not a thing to attempt to blame the other side. You are not even meeting. You have put them on recess. You control that. So, American people who have the ability to deductively reason can see that this is not a situation where it's a party thing. Okay. Being is not fixed, it's fluid. And first of all, we sought to see the dynamic unfolding. Identity is not a destination, but a continuous journey of becoming. Natural rhythm, growth is the sacred pulse of spirit and culture moving through us. And every moment matters. Each conversation, challenge, and change is an initiation into deeper truth. And I wouldn't be surprised that there's going to be more definitive insight, more definitive possibilities for us to generate a more enhanced space because of all these things that's happening around us, because we're forced to. And sometimes you have to be pushed out of uncomfortable. You got to be pushed out of comfortability, not uncomfortable. You have to be pushed out of comfortability. Sometimes we can be so comfortable just saying, oh, everything is moving smooth and moving smooth. And then all of a sudden a curveball comes into play and says, okay, now how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to deal with this adversity? Are you going to be stuck, which means you're at your fix? Or you can be like water. Water is very fluid. It does not get stuck. It does not get, you know, water can be solid or it can be liquid. And depending upon the modus operandi or whatever it is, it can even turn into vapor if it gets heated up. So the fluidity of how we move in these respective situations allows us to be established. Does anyone have any thoughts before we move on? Excellent. The study of how we become together. Cultural ontology. Ontology explores the nature of being itself, what it means to exist and evolve. And see, from a standpoint, as we start to recognize why cultural ontology is important, because it examines how our collective experiences, the stories or the griots that are in our respective lives, and the connections that shape who we are. And we are always shaped regardless if it's a cultural conversation, regardless if it's an environmental thing. We're even shaped by our peers. We're even shaped by those who we are choosing to interact with or choosing to be in concert with. All of that builds our respective cultural ontology. And here at the Comeback Collective Circle, we serve as a living laboratory because we're always delving into areas where, we're generating questions or generating possibilities and conversations. Why? Because we need to witness and nurture what it is that we can become together. See, I see nothing but people who are prosperous around me or prosperous who are a part of this community. Why? Because if I look at you at any less, then that's a disservice on me. See, we all have those sparks and those possibilities that we're able to flow through and develop through. And as we stay in those respective areas, we are all shaped by our choosing and and those respective possibilities. Any thoughts that anybody desires to share before we move on? Cultural wounds become sites of renewal. Now, before I even start to read those thoughts, when you look at that image, does anyone have a thought about how that image would align with cultural wounds become sites of renewal? If we look at the image, what does that image speak to you? It's usually artwork or imagery. Everyone has their own perception and own perspective. And it's not about a right thing or wrong thing, but it's just what is it that you see in this image?
Ask Nicole, I'll take a stab at it.
No problem.
It looks like a person emerging from ashes, whereas you
Mm,
previously were not seen, you're now coming out, being seen. And it's interesting. It appears as if she's reaching towards the ceiling, but she's still going.
Mm.
So it's like an emergence, is how I see it. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Anyone else? What you see when you look at this image? Well, as Miss Nicole just stated, that reminds me of that as well, because when you really look at it, you would say, okay, there must be a ceiling. But technically, as you can tell by the light emanating, there's not really a ceiling. And so when we start to recognize that some of those things that we may have been wounded in from a cultural standpoint or a systemic standpoint, we have the opportunity now to move in some level of power. And that's where it flows into prophetic intelligence. It's not about just articulating words, but when we look into our next days or our next weeks or our next months or our next lives, years, whatever, we have to speak forward into those areas. So we all have the ability to prophesy. And if we're doing it in an intelligent manner, we're shaping what our future possibilities can move us towards. And that's why our pain carries wisdom and insight that guides our collective healing. And we're not stuck in a space of just saying being healed physically. But sometimes we have to be healed mentally. We have to be healed, ethereally. And all those areas that we allow for those intelligent spaces to manifest through allows us to grow and to become. And when you can name the wounds, cultural healing begins when we courageously name our shared experiences. We all have certain experiences that we all can entail and says, you know what, I may have experienced that. I may experience some level of poverty that may have influenced how some of my movements were, or I may have experienced something that I may consider to be detrimental, and others may have shared that space. But you should never be in a space where it's just about sharing the wounds, but now it's about, okay, since we were wounded or scarred, now how do we allow the healing to manifest for ourselves? Because we can always stay in a mantra or in a conversation that keeps us just festering around the fact that we were hurt or harmed, instead of recognizing, okay, I can respect that. You were hurt and harmed. Now, what is next? Do we stay in the space of being hurt or harmed, or do we move into the space that, as you can see in the last thought on this particular slide, do we transform the story? Not eliminate it, not forget about it, not put it in a space to say, oh, just put that in the corner and just hide it. No. Let's transform it. Let's use that whatever occurred to now transform our path or enhance our path, because the story we avoid is often the story we're meant to transform. So even through all of the things that you may consider to be detrimental in your respective experiences, they were actually beneficial if you're transforming it. If you're taking that energy and now moving it from a space that could have been considered a negative or something detrimental, and now you bring it into a positive or something that's uplifting. That means in some ways you were meant to go through that. You may not have liked it, but you were meant to go through it. Why? Because now you're coming into the space as a transformer. And if you're willing to transform it and to be a blessing and a healing to others, then even though you went through something, now you're seeing the benefit of why you had to go through it. Because we all got a story. We all have certain things that we may necessarily not just throw out into the forefront, but they make up who we are. Any thoughts before we move on?
I have one thought,
Go
and
ahead.
I'm somewhat battling on it.
Okay.
And it goes back to an article I saw with from a podcast from a Texas pastor. I believe his last name is Webbin,
Hmm.
where he says that Blacks should stop whining about slavery. We should be thankful that, quote, we came and got you. So,
Hmm.
how we want to reframe the story, yes, we're survivors, but people who try to weaponize our story against us, and then realizing that other, I'll call it
Hmm.
nationalities don't have to experience that same weaponizing of your own trauma.
Hmm.
How do we then use that? So, like specifically, if we want to speak about the Jewish community
Hmm.
versus their Holocaust versus our 400 years of transatlantic slavery, how do we use that to our advantage? Because it seems like everyone is weaponizing it against us in a different way. How can we still use this as a healing part of our story? How can it still be used?
Excellent question. I would say this. I never forget there was a time frame at the church, my local church that I'm a part of. This probably goes back about 7 or 8 years ago. We took the youth department to Washington, D.C. And that was around the time when the Smithsonian African American Museum was first opening. And we were lucky enough to be one of the, first groups, big groups. It was about 40 of us, including, members of ministry, but it was about taking the whole youth department down there, so the experiences. And we took them there and we took them to the Blacks and Wax Museum. So if you're ever in Baltimore, if I believe it's still there, the Blacks and Wax Museum, that's another powerful expression because it even gives you a Maafa space where you get to see like the inside of a slave ship. But the reason why other people feel empowered or they feel entitled to weaponize our thoughts because we have allowed them to do that. And just like as you were able to see that podcast or that person be in a space where they can even express themselves in that particular tone, this is the part that we have to play in regards of taking the narrative back, which we started to. And as much as other communities are going to have their particular thoughts, we have to be the ones that have to keep the clarion call going in regards to, as you mentioned, the Jewish community. They will never let you forget their Holocaust. But as soon as we start talking about the transalacted or the middle passage or talk about 1619, everybody wants you to minimize that. And that's the problem. There have been times that people says, okay, I'll just accept that. Just minimize it. I won't talk about it. I'll be a good little boy and be quiet. No, we're not going to minimize it. We're not going to minimize um, all of the things that enhance or influence that, even if it's from a religious standpoint, even if it's some of our own people being partakers and participants in it. Even when we look at Europe's, responsible space in it and coming into someone else's land and, starting cutting it up and claim this is ours. Like, wait a minute, how you go on someone else's land? Same here, we can talk about the United States. Christopher Columbus never even set foot on this. The closest he got was, if I'm not mistaken, Cuba. He didn't even touch the United States, but we got the audacity that every second Monday in October they're talking about Christopher Columbus. We need talking about the Maria. I mean the whatever them three stupid ships are called, and this is all a lie. And when you start to dispel and start to break down things that were fallacies, since if people feel they don't like to hear the word lie, if it's a fallacy, that means you attempted to reshape history for your own benefit. And as we start to recognize that the African experience is not based off of slavery, that, you know, I know I can go from, regardless if people don't like it, I can go from the same book that people ascribe to and can recognize where the cultural dispensation of the Lord and Savior came from. And he doesn't look like anybody from Europe. I don't adhere to Michelangelo's cousin's viewpoint or, artwork on what it looked like. That was a systemic whitening of something because it's much more scary to say, wait a minute, do we really serve someone who looks dark and whose hair is full of wool? That doesn't look like someone from Europe. But we know this to be true. But the more and more that we start to empower ourselves and to take back the story and continue to elevate it and continue to do what those other communities do. Like how as Jewish communities have their yeshivas, we need more of those areas where people are starting to say, okay, you're going to find out about the Harriet Tubmans. You're going to find out about the Frederick Douglasses. You're going to find out about those people who on Black Wall Street. You're going to find out about these things that we're going to recognize like, wait a minute, this is the stuff that's empowering. It's like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me we can work together? As a community, you mean to tell me there are examples that are there that even though there were cultural wounds that we can still build upon and start to recognize, wait a minute, if we start to really reformat and switch up how we're doing certain things because it was positioned to us to be consumers. It wasn't positioned for us to be wealth generators. It wasn't positioned for us to really be in the space of the upper echelon of capitalism. We were supposed to be just individuals that go out and be good little workers. And then when we get our paychecks, we're supposed to be throwing it right back into the system to empower them. And then when we started to recognize, like, wait a minute, that's not the way. Now we're going to recognize, you don't do what the bank tells you to do. You act like the bank. And now, as we're generating that space and we're starting to create those spaces of renewal for ourselves and for the community, because it can't just be for yourself. And that's why this comeback collective circle is so important. It's not about, oh, I got this information, it's just only for me and mine. No, that's very minute and small. But when we start to generate those conversations, say, wait a minute, this is about, okay, as much as that I'm aspiring to be better, okay, I desire for other people to look like me to aspire to be better. And that only happens in communication. So they're hopeful that we would do that, like as they would tell certain athletes, shut up and just play. Like, no. We're in a season now and in an era and an aura where athletes are more outspoken. They're becoming more business minded. They're becoming much more adept or recognizing the power of their celebrity instead of just being, play for X amount of years and just go off into the sunset. Now they're retransforming their money and getting into those areas and other areas of the marketplace, which gives them longevity. And it's ruffling certain communities under their feathers, which it should. Because now we're starting to see that there is a renaissance. There was a Harlem Renaissance in the 1910s and 1920s, and there's in some ways a new renaissance. And even with this situation with this shutdown, to me, there's another opportunity of a renaissance for us to recognize that, wait a minute, we have the ability to continue to renew ourselves. We have the ability to continue to see those things that you attempted to make for our detriment. We're going to respect what happened. We're going to acknowledge what happened. We're going to keep talking about what happened. And at the same time, we're still moving forward. So we can do both. And hopefully that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else before we move forward? Excellent. We break down to break through. I'm going to say this again. We break down to break through. And as you can see by the image, it's about recognizing that this individual in the image is in an upward trajectory, not a downward. And there are times that we're looking for 50% growth and 20% growth. And sometimes if you're growing at 1% a day, do you know how much, even say if it was like you were in a particular investment vehicle that was growing at 1% a day, do you know how much really you would make in a year at just that 1% click? If it just steadily went up 1% over those 300 some odd days of trading over a course of a year. It says, oh, I'm only getting 1% growth for the year. And you'll be surprised that 1%, by the time the end of the year, you would sit there like, whoa, this is very interesting, what we were able to generate off of this just 1%. So of course, you desire to be in things that's going to give you more of a higher rate of return. But when we start to recognize that we must experience certain breakdowns, or sometimes when you hear people talk about buy the dip or things of that nature, those are kind of, how should I say, Easter eggs that give you the opportunity if you're investing in certain possibilities or putting yourself to allow for your finances or resources to work for you, and you're not just working for it. You start to recognize that something that looks like a breakdown, other people are saying, wait a minute, if I jump into this thing while it's down, and it starts to go back up like the person in this image, that means your money's going to grow along with it. And that's how other communities have been able to create more influential and longevity in their wealth cycle. And we as African Americans and brown people who are still based upon African diaspora as well, we need to start being a part and recognizing those things regardless of wherever you're at. Start where you're at. Don't sit there and say, oh, I need $5,000 or I need $2,000. Look, if you got $50, you got $100. There's too many apps out there, which we're not going to go into today, but there's too many vehicles that unless you're choosing not to participate, which means you're still moving in scarcity or a scare tactic, then your money, you're going to always be seeking to work for money instead of money working for you. And so that goes into the sacred signal. Breakdown is not failure, it's a divine invitation to transformation. And like I said before, when you sometimes if you're abreast of the markets and have access to your anointed intelligence, you'll be surprised. You're looking for a broker to do certain things for you, and you might have that broker right there on your phone or on your computer. If you're willing to search out the information and prompt correctly. Now, what collapse reveals? When structures fall, we see clearly what was never truly aligned with our purpose. That's why, as much as that I dislike the situation of what's going on in the United States at this particular moment, there's so much opportunity. There's still a tremendous opportunity if you're willing to look beyond the box. If you're stuck within the box, of course you're going to say, "Oh my God, this is happening, that's happening." Look, there are tremendous opportunities still out there. Technology is still ever expanding and growing. And if you're stuck still in the typewriter age where people are moving towards AI, that's the reason why the thing is going to collapse on you. Instead of you standing outside of it and say, "Oh, I see this thing collapsing. Okay, let me go pick this up on pennies on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar." Or maybe go partner up with someone and find me a piece of real estate. Or go over here and go invest in this particular investment vehicle that can potentially, not for me to get some quick fix, but all of a sudden, 5, 10 years from now, we turn around like, wow, that investment that did here done doubled or tripled. Wow, I should have been doing this a long time ago. So we have to experience that. And finally, initiation rising. Every fall becomes an initiation into higher consciousness and deeper truth. And that's why I stated earlier about the whole situation of sometimes with the optics. And I've noticed that here in the New York City area, they're looking for all, as this thing is moving towards November 1st, at the time of this taping, they were looking, some of the outlets were, looking, asking people going in the hoods sometimes, regardless if they were in Brooklyn or Bronx or, northern parts of Manhattan, like, okay, how's the SNAP benefits going to affect you and your family? It's like, wait a minute, don't do that. Yeah, we know in that particular zip codes and areas, it's a majority of us, but don't act like they're the poster child for this respective system or who has the ability to access that particular system. How come you're not going into middle America? How come you're not going into even where I live at? We're up there where we see people who are in some of those rural spaces or suburban spaces who are the ones that whip out that card when it's time for them to purchase their meals. They don't look like me. They don't look like you who are on this call right now or in this recording right now. And then it's like, wait a minute, don't shape the narrative to make it seem as if it's, we're just taking about it, or that very definitive lie, which they continue to spew out that, part of the healthcare reason is because they give it to illegal immigrants, which is a lie. We've already dispelled that, but they'll continue to share that because that helps shape a narrative. And if people who don't do their research, who refuse to really become more educated on the subject matter, they get stuck there and continue to make the assumption or the fallacy the truth. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not the truth. No, 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 it has to be because they said. Who said? Oh, the people who controlled you, just like how, you thought this administration was for you, and you actually voted against your own self-interest, and now healthcare costs could, quadruple or, move in multiples. And right now, these individuals who won't have access to basic food needs starting on in a couple of days. And think about it. And they're building a $300 million ballroom. You got to think about this. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the melanin or the lack of melanin on your skin. Sometimes it's about, are you really thinking? Or are you just choosing to, stay in the house while it's burning down around you instead of getting you and your family out the house and be like, okay, this thing is in ashes now. Now I'm gonna buy this in pennies on the dollar and rebuild a stronger structure so it's more beneficial. I see someone is okay. Did someone put something in the chat? Let's see. Okay, let's move on.
I can read it. I put it in
Okay,
the chat.
please.
Percentage of residents receiving SNAP benefits for fiscal year 2024. The highest rate was New Mexico with 21.2% of their residents.
Mm.
Uh, Among the highest was Louisiana, 18%, and also West Virginia,
Mm.
18%. So other than Louisiana, New Mexico and West Virginia, to my knowledge, do not have a very high Black and brown population. And I'm
Mm.
complete.
Thank you for that. See, that's why, that's why I respect Miss Johnson so much. That's why she's like one of the moderators here. Why? Because she always drops those bombs and those bars. Think about that. Those three states that she just noticed or mentioned. There's not many of us there. Even when they broke it down nationally, and when that number came to like 43.5 or 6%, which means it edges closer, from basic math, that means you round it up to about 44%. That 44% of the people who actually receive SNAP benefits are Caucasian. And then when they started breaking down the other dynamics, and it's like, okay, yeah. Because it would be crazy that if African Americans or people of African descent make up maybe 14% of the population, it just the math don't be mathing. How do all of a sudden if we make up barely 14% of the population, that we would be the ones that are majority are getting the SNAP benefits? And then if we look at our Hispanic brothers and sisters and say that okay, they make up a percentage that's around our number as well. And it's like, wait a minute, the math is not mathing. If we're not the majority, now if it was something that black and browns, as they're scared, and that's the reason why you're seeing all these things go out about, getting rid of Planned Parenthood and things of that nature, because they started to recognize there's certain conversations that are not really around about us. The reason why they keep putting Planned Parenthood in our communities, because they desire for us to minimize our birth rate, because they're recognizing that before they know it, they will be the minority. So, how do you start to influence the narrative or start to break down the narrative? Or you get rid of DEI, which really actually helped white women more than help people in our community. So, did you really hurt us? Or you were so, you know, despising and vindictive that you would utilize the space where it was always promoted that, go work for the federal government. That's once you get established and things of that nature, then all of a sudden y'all come in and first thing y'all do is gut over 300,000, well, more than 300,000 jobs, but out of those jobs, it really impacted our community most because we lost 300,000 at least black women. We're not even talking about the black males, but 300,000 black women that used to work for the federal government don't work for the government right now. You thought that number just came out of the blue. Oh, that's right. There was an election where a white man who moves in an elitist manner went up against an African American woman. Okay. And if we don't see the tea leaves, we can be stuck on that breakdown, not recognizing there are possibilities for us to have a breakthrough. The collective as a field of becoming. And I'm going to do this, read this clockwise, starting from the accelerated evolution. We evolve faster together than we ever could alone. That's the reason why we keep building up the collective. That's why we keep building up these conversations. That's why we're going to continue to be a clarion call for our respective communities in regards to this and to build this inclusive community. Because, yeah, as my wife would say, you have to have allies. We're not here just to be pigeon-toed. So as those who are in alliance with us, we welcome you. But at the same time, we know who we're called to, and we know that we have to build up our communities and our opportunities and make sure those areas of financial literacy, make sure those areas of cultural ontology, and those areas are recognized, the beingness of being us is powerful, wonderful, and great, and is nothing to minimize. I feel wonderful that I married an African American woman. I feel wonderful that I have 6 children who have some African descent in them, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be a Jamaican. I'm proud of that island that my parents came from. I'm proud of my cultural lineage. There's nothing for me. I'm proud of the Maroons. I'm proud of all this stuff. And all we can go on and on and on. And that's part of when you start to become empowered by your story, you start to recognize. That's the reason why you desire for my story to be minimized. Because once we start really unveiling the truth, now it lets us know y'all are just a bunch of small people. Y'all just look for areas where, because y'all don't have any real resources, so you'll go plunder everything else. And then when the people get wise enough, like what happened to Muammar Gaddafi, and that's the reason why he was killed. Because he was killed because he was talking about creating that African diaspora and moving away from the dollar and having the natural resources and continuously kicking Europe out. People don't want that. Come on. And and this is not me doing hearsay or fake news, but even Obama says that was one of the only times out of his 8 years that he recognized that he may have made a mistake during that Arab summer. Because it helped destabilize a region where, you know, as he was so badly called a dictator, and we're staying on topic, but so badly called a dictator that, people, the residents and the citizens of that country were sharing in the oil profits. And people can have free national health care and free national education where people were becoming doctors and being able to reinvest and be able to help other countries on that particular continent. And when all the stories really started coming out, I was like, wait a minute, but based upon what they shared in the West, you would say that this man was just a terrorist and this and this and this. Like, wait a minute, come to find out, it's like, y'all lied. Y'all shaped the narrative. You used the media to shape a narrative to make something that looked bad or something that was working because he was a leader of that country for so many decades. So if he was so bad, why wouldn't his people really have gotten rid of him? But you created chaos to create a situation, and then when everything started to fall apart, now you can sneak in and come in and try to, okay, we'll control a little bit of this and we're going to control a little bit of that. And there's wickedness. But, as they say, everything comes to the light. Mirror and mentor. The circle reflects our truth and guides our growth. See, if you're not willing to take some of the information that we're sharing here to speak to those outside of the collective or even to invite them to become a part of the collective, then you're doing yourself a disservice because it's almost as if as we generate these conversations, you're kind of making it small. You're keeping it small. And it's not meant to be small. The circle is meant to expand. So hopefully you take those opportunities to share with those that wait a minute, there's some quality information that's being shared. Maybe you should, be a part of that. Maybe you can be a part that can help enhance what they're doing over there. Collective movement. Together we create momentum for lasting transformation. That's what it's all about. If we're not growing in our resources, growing in our possibilities, growing in those things that we can be in conversation about, even if we differ, that's great, even if we differ, because that enhances the possibility of having some level of debate that we can maybe find something that wasn't necessarily there initially and then allows us to continue to become. So don't never get into a space where it's like, oh my God, I may have a difference of opinion. Great. Share it. Don't be in that space where you're just muted and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna not say anything. No, that's the problem. That's what they desire for us to do. And now as we're starting to become even more emboldened and more empowered, it's like, no, I'm not staying quiet about that. Even if we call ourselves some sort of title within churches or whatever the case may be, or even title in your community, we got to speak up to power. Because if we don't, that means we're accepting what they're doing. And it's like, oh, okay, that's just what they do. No, 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 and no. And finally, clarity through connection. Community reveals our calling and illuminates our path forward. See, if we're not willing to be in a space that others are coming behind us and they feel like, yo, I can't really see. Okay, I'm here to shine the light on them. We're here to shine the light on them. It's not just your birthday, but we're here to shine a light on them. And the reason for that is because now when you shine that light, that gives clarity. And if the clarity becomes expansive, that means that light is getting brighter. And if that light is getting brighter, that means we all can see, not just some people can see. That means we all can see. As we move on to the next slide. Transformation as a continuous practice. Number one, the reawakening. Each session opens new dimensions of being and understanding. That's why it's up to me and me being responsible enough to say, you know what, there's certain things that we are establishing our footing in because we need those spaces to become really entrenched on ontology. But at the same time, it's all about reawakening. Transformation has to happen on a daily basis. It's not something that's just, oh, I'm transformed today, but I'm going to be untransformed tomorrow. That leads us to number two. It must be sustaining. Reflection and dialogue keeps the breakthrough alive and growing. It's like having a business and you're not in the space of promoting it. As we can tell by a lot of different brands out there, and you would say, oh, wait a minute, these brands are multi-billion-dollar brands. Why are they still out here promoting this? And I still see their logo out there, or they having commercials because they recognize that's part of sustainability. So if you're not talking about your sustainability when it comes to the practice of your own transformation, that means there's a possibility your light will get dimmed. And it's not that someone else is dimming your light, you're dimming your light. And that's not workable. That's not powerful. And that's definitely not beneficial. And aligning. Becoming is not an event, it's a lifelong practice of alignment. Remember that. You're becoming daily. Give us this day our daily bread. And say old bread. And say yesterday bread. And say bread from 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, what my grandmama did, what my grandfather did. No. This day of daily bread. Think about that the same space when you're transforming yourself or being in that space of transformation. It's a daily process. Your personal ontology in motion. These are things I desire for you to reflect upon today. Where am I unfolding right now? And the reason why you have to continuously be unfolding, because just because today was a great day doesn't mean that tomorrow can't be even a greater one. Or, oh, we had a great event over here. Okay, so duplicate it. Find what was working and do it again. And if whatever works, and if you find certain things didn't work, don't do that again. But don't stop, because we got to keep unfolding. The unfolding is not as a one-time event or a 6-month event or, ever so often event. No, no, no. Unfolding happens daily. So make sure you know where you're unfolding. What breakdowns are preparing me for breakthrough? We all have experienced some level of breakdown that we can always point to. Says, wait a minute, that was the catalyst for this. And actually, when I look at that this, it was like, wait a minute, that this was a good thing. So that's the reason why you had that breakdown. That's like having or making a mistake and recognizing that mistake, even though it was considered a mistake, kind of led you towards your breakthrough or led you towards that unfolding or led you towards that invention or led you towards that possibility that helped others. So even sometimes that breakdown is a blessing. And sometimes we look at breakdowns like, oh my God, never experienced a breakdown. You don't experience a breakdown, how are you going to be able to help someone else? And that breakdown is there for you to recognize how you can be empowered as you help someone else. And how can I help renew the culture I'm a part of? I don't care if you're Jamaican. I don't care if you're African American. I don't care if you're Ghanaian. I don't care if you're from wherever. Other cultures recognize the power of perpetuating their culture and being proud in it and being powerful. Why is it, as even Miss Johnson alluded to earlier, why is it that they desire so badly for us to minimize our culture? Because they understand if we self-minimize, they don't have to do it. If we say, slavery was something that happened back then, why are you talking about it? No, we're not. We're going to always talk about it. Why are you talking about George Floyd as we had that experience a couple of weeks ago? Why are you talking about George Floyd? Hey, man, George Floyd looked like me. That I could have been George Floyd. And are you going to just look at all the skeletons in my past and attempt to throw that out there to say you're going to minimize that life or his life wasn't as worth as much as someone else's? No. And if it means that someone has to stand up and deal with the foolishness, and you just say, okay, this is sometimes the hearts of men will speak loudly. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to speak it up. I'm not going to continuously speak up for people who look like me. That's not meaning that I'm going to continue to say, yo, the culture has to continue to develop and to grow, and we are part of that process. And when you allow yourself to move in that space, to feel empowered and to recognize you are powerful in your own self, and you can stand up erect and stand up tall and not feel like, okay, I walk into these rooms, I gotta hunch down and have my head down. No, no, no. I'm standing up and they're wondering, like, who is this person? Exactly. Same way you walk into the room with presence, we're doing the exact same thing. I am not done, I am becoming. And that's why that image is so powerful on the right-hand side, because it shows that the many different tributaries and possibilities that we have, and how as long as that we stay illuminated, it's okay to say, okay, this is what we accomplished today. Now, what is it that we can accomplish tomorrow? What is the plan for tomorrow? What is the plan and possibility? What is the plan for even if tomorrow is a day where, oh my God, I kind of experienced a down day. Okay, that's good. You still went forward. But I went down tomorrow, or I went down that day. I'll just say it's going forward. What did you learn from that down day? Well, I was able to tweak this and do that, and recognize how I was able to be impactful along my path and even learn something. Then, okay. Now, take that information, take that wisdom, and keep moving forward. That's why none of us are ever not done. We're not done. We're always in a space of becoming. And with that said, we are complete. Let me get this there. As this thing is acting up today, let's stop the share. There we go. Excellent. So, Mr. Guthrie, we didn't really hear your voice today. What takeaways do you have for today from what we were sharing? Is Mr. Guthrie there, or is he doing some stuff with the children? Okay, we're not gonna belabor long. We're not gonna belabor long. Ms. Johnson, what did you get out of today's conversation?
It reiterates the point that the thing that I've heard a couple spiritual leaders say, comfort is sin, even though it
Mm,
upsets me. You cannot move forward if you're just comfortable in your current position. So all the things we're mentioning, helping the culture, moving along, spreading awareness, if you're comfortable, you're not doing anything.
mm.
So it means I have to continue to fight myself to break out of comfort. And I'm complete.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So once again, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate those who are able to be here for this particular week. And when you have the ability to stay on your respective path, regardless if it's up days or down days, it's still a blessed day for us to manifest through and to move according. And let me just share this real quick as we bring this thing to a close. As always, you always have the opportunity to support the Comeback Collective Circle. If you're doing it by a Cash App, it's $ Gregory Clarke D Min. If you're doing it by a Venmo, it's Gregory Clarke D Min, so that means without the $. And if you desire to be a blessing via Zelle or PayPal, it's the same email address, esquire971@gmail.com. And I can't wait till we have a great opportunity to have a conversation. Go continue to be great. Don't allow anyone to minimize who you are in your respective possibility. Be in that space of not only being powerful, but being forthright in your movement. So have a blessed week, and we'll be back next time with another edition of the Comeback Conversations. Go and be powerful this week.
Blessings.
Blessings.